Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome to our Art of Psychedelic Integration discussion. It is an absolute joy to have you all here talking about one of my favorite topics today. And really, what I want to do is kind of give the foundation for how this is going to flow. And then we will sort of dive into the juicy content. So, I have a bunch of things I kind of want to share, just some really foundational sort of things I've learned about psychedelic integration over 20 years or so of being in this space. And then I want to have plenty of time for all of you to get to use your voices and there's specific questions I don't address or anything that's related to this topic of plant medicines and integration. I would love to have an interactive dialogue with all of you. I don't want to just hear my voice today. That's not fun. So, okay. So to begin with, I just want to give just a very quick background of my bio as it relates to this topic so that you kind of have a lens and an understanding of where I'm coming from. I discovered ayahuasca 21, 22 years ago and madly fell in love with the process to the point where I ended up apprenticing with her for a decade in the Shipibo Kanibo tradition. But out of the gate, it was abundantly obvious to me that we needed people that helped in the aftermath of these experiences. I think it was my second trip to the jungle in the early 2000s. I lived in LA at the time. I remember getting a cab home to my apartment, and on the way from the airport to my cab or to the my apartment after this cycle, for some reason, seeing a sign for a strip club sent me into a spiral of despair and processing because it just kind of was a reflection of the world. It was such a contrast of what I experienced in the container of the jungle and the experience of the medicine. And I didn't leave my apartment for 3 or 4 days in this deep space of despair. And kind of the heart of it was feeling like I didn't have anybody to talk about this with. Nobody in my life had ever taken ayahuasca, ever really even heard of it. I had a really awesome therapist, but he had no experience with plant medicines. Thankfully, this is changing dramatically, but it was so loud and obvious to me at that time that, man, we need a lot of support making sense of these huge, profound, and beautiful, but also sometimes confusing and traumatizing experiences. I didn't have the language for integration or anything at that time, but it did plant this seed of like, wow, this is needed. It was 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, when I was deep in my apprenticeship with ayahuasca that I decided one day I'm going to commit myself to helping people integrate psychedelic experiences. This is about 15 years ago. Everybody around me said I was crazy. They were probably right. But A, I was so passionate about it, and B, it was so obvious doing all the medicine work with my teacher that people needed it, both in the preparation and in the integration. There was no framework, there was no context, but I was doing it informally anyway, because I was the organizer of the ayahuasca community that my teacher ran. And so people were coming to me with questions all the time anyway. I decided to make it a formal business. And fast forward 15 years, I've helped probably, I don't know, thousands of people by now, which is so incredible. And also now get to teach other people to do this work for themselves and others, which I think is incredibly necessary because the last I looked earlier this year, 8% of Americans, just in America, have worked with psychedelic medicines, which is around 15 to 20 million people. If you think of that globally, millions and millions and millions of people are turning to psychedelic medicines because the Western modalities of healing aren't enough. We don't feel good in our bodies. To put that into context, 75% of people in the US take at least one pharmaceutical medicine. And those medicines typically don't facilitate healing, whereas plant medicines often do. So we have a gigantic community of people, most of which are relatively new working with the medicines. And I would argue that whether you're new or experienced, it is absolutely essential to have an integration specialist, whether it's a therapist or a coach, formal training versus shamanic training, both completely valid to support us in the making sense of these mysterious and incredibly powerful experiences. So I come from the shamanic lens. I do have I got a minor in psychology when I was in college a long time ago. It's always been a passion of mine to understand the human psyche, but I don't have as much formal training in that as I do in the shamanic space. And of course, lots of experience with the plants. And I feel like both are necessary. I love seeing more people from the clinical space with traditional training, either in psychology, therapy, or even doctors and nurses that have taken my training that are just passionate about understanding some of these shamanic principles, some of the core elements to integration, because really all these sort of ways in which we get to interact with people in the clinical or the shamanic and coaching spaces are all valid in terms of like learning this discipline so that we can truly be of service to help people. I am increasingly ecstatic to see the bridge being built between the clinical and shamanic spaces. I think all of us should have seats at the table to have voices in terms of how we're going to evolve these modalities going forward. And all these perspectives are definitely valid. But like I said, no matter how advanced we are in sitting with these plants, myself included, it's so essential to have somebody that we trust that can help ask the right questions, sort of spiral into the meaning, the deeper meaning, and the homework that often comes from sitting with plants. Typically, when I have a master plant diet or a plant medicine journey, there's the experience itself, and then there's the wisdom that the experience reveals that asks me to embody and to ground it in. Maybe this is a good point where we can start to define integration, what we mean by that, at least what I mean by that in the context of working with the plants. One of the words that I've started to use interchangeably with integration is embodiment. Because for me, that gives this really necessary reminder that a core component of integration involves our physical bodies and our somatic beings. I think this is important for a lot of us, myself included, because we can get lost in the mental like concepts that the plants bring, the idea of integration versus the actual execution of it. So integration certainly involves an understanding of what happens in these spaces. I would argue, though, that it's not even necessary or maybe even possible to fully understand what happens when we work with mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, wachuma. It's beyond the capacity for the mind to hold anyway. So integration, the heart of it for me, is more about what we do, how we change our patterns, our thoughts, our behaviors, our lifestyle, the homework that we do to help ground in and really embody the beautiful insights that the medicines give us. If we don't commit to that, what happens is the experience that we had at a retreat or a ceremony, even if it was like the best experience of our lives, we can just sort of over time put it on the back burner. It becomes this thing maybe we fondly remember, but didn't change our lives for the better. The plants don't do the work for us, right? They reveal and move energy and perform all kinds of miraculous things for us, but only we can actually do the work to improve our lives going forward. And so to me, that's what the heart of integration is. In a little bit, I'm going to share what I call the 10 pillars of integration. What I have noted over time are like, just those core elements. And meaning is really towards the end of the priority list for me. Whereas the mind tends to make that the priority. And if we stay lost in only wanting to understand the meaning, we don't actually integrate and embody the lessons in a deeper way. Uh, so for me, integration is more about embodiment than it is a mental understanding. So as a modality, this is interesting to note. Integration really has only been a formal act that is recognized by mass consciousness since about 2017. Towards the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, some of us began to actually document processes of integration, both in the clinical and the shamanic spaces. This is about the time I started putting pen to paper, just starting putting down the pillars, that just trying to be more thoughtful around what the most important elements were to this process. Up until that point, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I was doing everything very intuitively, very guided by the plants, primarily ayahuasca, because that's the one that I have trained with and that I've sat with the most, but also informed by Wachuma, mushrooms, many, many master plant diets. And up until that point, like everyone else that were sort of pioneers in the field, I was doing it from a deeply intuitive space. In fact, I would have argued back then that it can't be structured, that you can't formalize or ritualize the process of integration. I recognize now that that was an act of deflectiveness, resistance on my part because I didn't at that point think I had it in me to actually document what was core and essential to the process. But I began that around 2018, inspired by other people in the space. And what really I think has manifested is that there's a handful of psychology modalities that I'll list in a moment, in addition to those of us who have approached it from this shamanic lens, that in the last just 5, 6 years, so it's really a brand new discipline, we've come together and created frameworks plural because there's a quite a few of us that have different perspectives, but there is some golden threads in all of them, just around what integration looks and feels like, the core steps, what is universal essentially. And I would say the branches of psychology that have most influenced integration, at least in order of impact from my perspective. Number one, Jungian psychology. I'm a huge, huge student of Carl Jung, especially because his voice is one of the most profound voices we've ever had in understanding the subconscious. And plant work is subconscious work. So integration work has to embody an understanding and a love of deciphering the language of the subconscious, which is so different than the language of the conscious mind. So Jungian psychology for me is tops on the list of influencers, and also what Carl Jung understood about dream work. I took a break from plant medicine work for a period of time, and I remember asking my therapist, what's the thing, the most impactful thing I can continue to do outside of drinking plant medicines that will perpetuate this process of self-discovery and without missing a beat? He said, dream work, which makes total sense because dream work is really, really instrumental in working with the plants too. We often have dreams before, during, and after ceremonial work where the plants can communicate to us through that subconscious space. So Jungian psychology is a wonderful discipline to be a student of if this is part of your passion, integration. Transpersonal psychology is right up there too. Similar psychological modality that aims to understand these multi sort of faceted layers of our human psyche and how it relates to our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with each other and even our relationship with the world, spirit, plants, etc. I'm also a huge fan of IFS, internal family systems. When I first started engaging with an IFS therapist, I felt like that's what ayahuasca had been doing with me for many years. IFS being parts work, being a modality that helps us to start understanding more about these segmented parts of ourselves that are formed in traumatic and less than ideal situations that want to be loved and integrated and heard rather than creating conflict. So IFS is a really, really complementary psychological modality that goes really well with integration work. Same with family constellation work, nature relationship psychology, and last but not least, probably most importantly, is our last decade or so embracing the notion of becoming trauma informed. So I find it really interesting that really in parallel, the plants and psychedelics have come online as a really, really powerful and effective mode of healing about the same time that we really amped up our understanding of trauma, of PTSD. The reason why I find that so interesting in parallel is just because the plants are so incredible at helping us resolve trauma, close trauma loops, and release trauma from the body. So, being trauma informed is, I would say, an essential aspect of doing this work because it takes the wonderful wisdom that has risen in the last 2 decades or so to help us understand how to work with people more effectively that are experiencing any sort of PTSD response, which these days is truly the vast majority of us. Living in the world as a traumatic experience, and even sometimes taking plant medicines or doing master plant dietas can feel traumatic as well. So, to be a student of what we are learning more and more about how trauma impacts the body and the psyche is so essential because then we can take that and amplify the work we do in the integration space to create more safety, first and foremost, for people that are dealing with trauma responses, and also to continue the work that the plants themselves do in starting to unearth these trauma loops, help us to process them, the things that we couldn't process when the traumas occurred because it wasn't safe or possible to do so. And so, as trauma informed coaches and therapists, we can continue sort of pick up where the plants may have left off because it's rare that, even a handful of ceremonies can close the trauma loops that a few decades or more of life has created. So those are the modalities that are, I think, most impactful from the clinical lens. And then you add in, of course, all the shamanic wisdoms from thousands of years of working with these medicines. I studied in the Shipibo Canibo tradition, and we know there's at least about 3,000 recorded years of history of the Shipibo working with ayahuasca, likely far more years and years of wisdom that aren't recorded. And so to also take those traditions that have this centuries long history with working with sacred plants and to learn from those perspectives. That said, I will make the argument that the indigenous mind and the Western mind are not the same mind, but that doesn't mean we can't find the space of commonality with all of these perspectives for the greater good of our healing and helping people in the aftermath. So now I want to share what I call the 10 pillars of integration. I'm not going to go into great detail of these, but these are part of the foundation of the course that I teach, the 6-month adventure into learning to be an integration specialist. I'm sharing these pillars so that you can get a better sense of the context, the philosophy that I hold. The pillars, the 10 pillars, aren't in any particular order to a certain degree, in that all of us integrate in a very personal way. We're all at different places in our lives, our soul's journeys. And so there isn't a formula to integration that I have found yet, that each person starts in the same place and ends in the same place. However, I developed these pillars. I think it took me about 3 or 4 years to finally say these are where I'm going to commit. Because it seems like these are the golden threads that are involved in most integrations. Not all 10 pillars are relevant to all the ceremonies we do, but they are relevant to our lives as a whole and our journeys as a whole to and how we relate to these experiences and these beings. The pillars that exist at the very start of the list I'm going to give you and at the very end of the list that I'm going to give you are important, are placed intentionally. The ones in the center can go anywhere, anytime. So I'm just going to go through these 10 first, just to kind of give that foundation. So number one, to me, is the most important pillar, and it might be a surprise because it's not one that is necessarily emphasized as much in other sort of modalities or perspectives on integration. I call this the pillar of mysticism. When I start working with a client out of the gate that I've never worked with before, what I want to know fundamentally is how they see the world. So this pillar embodies knowing the individual's relationship to life and death. What do they believe from a spiritual lens death is? What's the meaning of life? Also, their relationship to suffering. Does suffering have a meaning? Is it random? Of course, knowing there are no wrong answers, but I want to know how this individual sees the world. Do they feel victimized by the world? Do they feel empowered? What's their view on shadow work? Have they committed to doing shadow work previously? Or are they brand new to this kind of exploration of this part of their psyche? Sometimes I'll ask questions like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love yourself? And please explain. Relationship with the world and with themselves is the first pillar. Why is this the most important thing to me? Because it's the foundation that the plants are going to work with. Plant medicines mirror our belief systems, the stories we tell ourselves, and the way that we see the world. They sometimes disrupt that by showing us when they're limited, but the plants often mirror the experiences that we are embodying, but they turn up the volume in a way that gets really, really loud, which is why it's effective. And so I like to just kind of have, 10, 15-minute conversation. It doesn't have to be super detailed to just understand how in this space and time the client I am working with relates to the world. So the pillar of consciousness or mysticism is for me the place to begin integration, because if we don't understand what we believe on the macro, it's very hard to get clarity on what we believe on the micro. That's been my experience. And then pillar two, also very intentionally placed at the beginning, is the pillar of reflection or meditation. When people ask me what's the single most important thing that somebody can commit to in integration, it is this, the balance of doing and being. Most of us do all of our lives with very small gaps of intentional being, intentional pause. This does not have to be a time-consuming pillar. You don't have to meditate for hours a day, but there is a necessity in my mind to commit to checking in. This pillar is about inner reflection. It's about a commitment to noting what it is that we're feeling or experiencing any given day. It's personally how I start every day. After I get up, brush my teeth, do a little bit of self-care, I sit down at my altar and I ask myself the same question every morning. How you doing, kiddo? How you feeling? Checking in. Because if I don't ask and turn inward, I won't actually know unless it becomes an urgency, something unavoidable. And so guiding people into, if it's their first time creating this kind of spiritual foundation of checking in, you can check in by going for a walk or a jog or connecting with nature. It doesn't have to be at an altar. It can be through formal meditation, but it can be through informal meditation, through yoga every morning, dancing, whatever it is, it has to be a pause of the externalization of our focus and consciousness and to bring that inward and to connect with ourselves. Otherwise, we have nothing to measure. We don't really have an awareness of what we're working with unless we ask and pay attention. This pillar has got a lot more intricacies, but that's kind of the base level of it. And it leads into pillar three, which is the pillar of ritual. One of the reasons why I think a lot of us are falling in love with plant medicine ceremonies is because of the shamanic ritual aspect. I grew up Catholic. I loved the ritual of the church, but I left the church at one point because the dogma, some of the hypocrisy didn't work for me anymore. But my God, I missed the ritual. And I didn't realize how much that was true until I found myself in my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I just adored the sort of sacredness and the process that was brought to the ceremony that really helped to create a sense of holiness and safety. So we can, of course, create that in our everyday lives. We all have habits, brushing our teeth, taking showers, things like that. Ritual is a habit that is based in sacredness, that is based in the desire to connect on a spiritual level, to step out of the mundane, to create a container that just feels like it's heart connected, like it's special. And so having any commitment to creating more ritual in our lives, be that a waking up ritual, a go to bed ritual, an afternoon ritual, a nature ritual, a ritual with our families, a ritual we do before eating, like so many ways we can incorporate it. It just depends on what is important and resonant to each of us as individuals. But I find that ritual is a powerful element of integration because it brings back in that sense of sacredness and safety that medicine ceremonies usually embody, at least in a shamanic sense. And it gets us out of our sort of monkey wheel brain patterns that we're there to expand upon anyway. So ritual just creates more sacredness and safety, which we can never have enough of that. The next handful of pillars can kind of come and go as needed. So, well, maybe ritual four is always needed. It's just, I don't, I can't say where in the process it will come in. Pillar four is about somatic practices. So this is the pillar of somatic connection. I mentioned earlier, I don't feel like we can integrate anything without focusing on our physical bodies. So this is where we have an awareness of what our physical bodies need, what we're eating, if that's supportive, if it's medicine, movement and exercise, of course, somatic work, which really is about being tuned into the vibration and the frequency of our nervous systems. It's just the pillar where we stay committed to being conscious of the needs and the desires of our beautiful vessels that we live in. In my plant medicine integration course, we have a class that's fully to get dedicated on somatic practices. Honestly, you could train in somatic integration for many, many years and just scratch the surface. And this is another modality that every day it seems like there's more understanding of the somatic connection between our consciousness and our physical bodies and nervous systems. So this is a ever expanding pillar, but an essential one if we want to have a completion of integration of any of these experiences. Pillar five is one of my favorites. It's about creative expression. It is an inevitable part of the process of integration that we reach places of feeling stuck. That's because when we're in our heads and trusting that space to decipher things, it's not the right tool for the job. And quite often we hit this wall. Creative expression is just one of those incredible spaces of channeling, of using our voices that can disrupt that stuckness. Of course, the goal with creative expression is that we are channeling something creative rather than manifesting it from our limited minds. And this is limitless in terms of how we can express ourselves creatively. Journaling, painting, singing, dancing, photography, pottery, like you name it. Sometimes just taking a time out from trying to mentally understand something and to maybe write a poem about our ceremony, to create something fine art that reflects that ceremony. We can get more to the heart of what it means because we're expressing ourselves in a more limitless way. So oftentimes this is a pillar I bring into the coaching that I do to disrupt that feeling of being stuck in our heads. And it's super powerful. It's important to emphasize with the creative pillar, it's not about being talented. We don't have to be experts at it, the best singers in the world, whatever it might be. We have to love it. We have to love it enough that when we do these things, we can get out of our own way. And sometimes that's where the gold comes through of like, oh, now I get what that ceremony meant or what that element of the ceremony was expressing. Pillar six is what I call the pillar of acceptance or the pillar of self-discovery grounded in acceptance. Pillar six goes with the notion from IFS that there are no bad parts. What's important about this reflection is that, and it's something I have to remind myself as well as my clients all the time, that we look at all the information that comes through doing this work as good information. Sometimes we uncover really painful things that happened in our lives that maybe we didn't remember. We also learn more about our own shadows, our own capacities to cause harm, the things we might feel ashamed about that we are. So this pillar reminds us always that it's always good information, that we want to know these things, even if they're painful and difficult. And this pillar also has a bunch of ways in which we can gracefully integrate the hardest things that the plants bring to the surface, including repressed memories, including things that we're ashamed of. So it's a pillar that helps to create guidance around integrating the things that make us contract. the things that sometimes we wish we weren't aware of after a given ceremony, and sometimes the things that we're confused about is whether or not they are true. So this pillar has a lot of compassionate inquiry questions for the coach or the therapist, and also the individual to work through really difficult, painful things that come to the surface, which is inevitable doing this work. Pillar 7 is the pillar of meaning, intentionally put towards the end. Because again, meaning is helpful when we have an understanding of what maybe the plants were communicating with us, but it's not necessary. I don't think I need to fully understand a ceremony in order to fully integrate it. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know that it's possible to fully understand the things that the plants communicate. So I honor the fact that the mind wants meaning. All of us have minds that love to have understanding, but it isn't the end all be all the way the mind wants to tell us. So this is the pillar that allows for these illuminations, but also to remind us to hold those lightly, and that what we believe to be true today may not be what we believe to be true next week or next year, and to allow the dynamic nature of the meaning to evolve and grow. Pillar 8 is the pillar, I call it the pillar of mindfulness, because this is the pillar that reminds us that we have to take these insights that the plants give and use it as a space to reprogram our minds. Much of what the plants do is heal the limited nature of our minds, the stories of suffering that our minds have created, the reprogramming and belief systems that have to be destroyed and rebuilt. So this is the pillar that has all kinds of different modalities that help us to reprogram our thoughts, our behaviors, so that we're walking in more love and joy. We're putting into practice the awarenesses that we're gifted as a result of this work. It also involves the reminder that we need to look back where we've come and to really honor the journey we've had. We're so often focused on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that we need to intentionally take a time out occasionally and say, oh my God, look how far I've come. Because it can be so motivating to continue when we recognize how many trauma loops, belief systems, whatever it is that we have been able to transform. But to take that time in this pillar to celebrate our hard work and to note the things that we've already integrated as an example, as well as be responsible for the transformations that we're focused on now and the little things that we can do and how we speak to ourselves and others, mantras, meditation practices, whatever it might be that we commit to continue to reprogram ourselves based upon what the plants have taught us. Pillar 9, these two are very intentionally at the end. Pillar 9 is the pillar of lifestyle transformation. This is the homework. This is where we make changes to relationships, vocations, where we live, how we're relating to each other. These are the big changes, the things that we express outwardly. And it's intentionally at the end because we typically recommend not to make major changes right away at integration so that we can allow the bigness of the experience we went through with the plants to really kind of ground in. We find our center again before we make the small and large lifestyle transformations. But this is the pillar that holds us accountable for doing our homework. And last, but definitely not least, is the pillar of community and reciprocity. This is the pillar that reminds us to pay it forward. This is the pillar that reminds us that we can't just take from the plants. We have to put them back in the ground to say thank you for the tradition and the wisdom keepers that have allowed these practices to stay alive long enough for us in this time and place to take advantage of these experiences. So this is where we give back, whether it's directly by placing the plants themselves in the ground or giving back to the tribal communities that we sat with. It could also be about planting a garden or participating in ways to take care of nature as a whole. She doesn't care if you drank ayahuasca and instead you plant wachuma. Like it's all relevant in terms of helping her to thrive. It could also be that you give back to the community. Sometimes people do this by paying it forward for other people to have access to plant medicines that maybe wouldn't without that assistance. But it's just a reminder that we have to stay committed to giving back to nature and to the people that have dedicated their life to this work so that it can continue for forevermore. So those are the 10 pillars. Before I break and open it up for discussion, I also want to share just a handful of what I feel are the most essential traits for any of us doing the work in integration for other people. This could be in the formal psychological space or in the shamanic space. These are universal traits. First and foremost, a love of psychology and subconscious and consciousness as a whole. We have to be super curious about individual content, consciousness, the collective consciousness, the macro consciousness, because that's what the plants are constantly teaching us about. And then understanding a desire to understand the subconscious, the language of the subconscious, the language that the plants speak, and dream work as a whole is really, really helpful. I also feel like it's super important to have an intimate connection with at least one of these medicines. We don't have to be experts at all of the medicines. None of us can be. That's a full-time job all its own. But to have at least one main ally, ayahuasca, iboga, mushrooms, wachuma, it could be even, you might love synthetics, MDMA, ketamine, ibogaine. Well, ibogaine's not a synthetic, but it's a hybrid. Regardless, like all of these medicines are available to be in intimate relationship with. I don't use the language that we become experts in them because I don't even know what that means. I have 20 years with ayahuasca and I barely scratched the surface. But to have intimacy and just a deep desire to understand and to continue to unravel the complexities of the consciousness of at least one of these beings, so that you have a core ally for your learning in this space. Basic shamanic training, especially around, let's say, your main ally is ayahuasca. If you have at least one shamanic tradition that you have some basic understanding of their cosmology, their ideologies, the way they do the work, what happens behind the altar, at least to like a foundational degree. So you can have an understanding of what people are going to go through when they do this ceremony work, because obviously that is essential to helping them integrate it. Might go without saying, which also kind of gotta love humanity, which is not always an easy thing to love, but deeply care about human suffering and want to make a difference in helping people suffer less. Which means that as an individual, you got to have your own boundaries around suffering, your own sense of safety, so that being around people who are going through difficult things doesn't suck you in. My core teacher used to use the example of a lifeguard, that doing this work is very much like being a lifeguard. And lifeguards know when they go to help somebody that is drowning, the first thing that person will do is to make them feel like they're drowning too. And so we have to know how to hold our own in this sea of consciousness and the experience of suffering, to be able to hold that in a way that we don't lose our center. Or if we do, we have lots of tools and techniques to bring ourselves back to center. And of course, people that support us in doing the same. We got to love nature and the spirit realm because that's fundamental to what this work is about. And also, I feel like we have to love playing detective to help people connect the dots and decipher the complicated messages that come through doing this work. It is never obvious. For me, one of the reasons why working with plants is so impactful is they never do what we expect them to do. If they did do what we expected them to do, we wouldn't need them because our minds would know exactly what was going to happen. But our minds are almost always wrong, and that's why this work is so powerful. So we, as integration specialists, have to love the space of confusion that we can bring to a place of clarity on some level, meaning emotional clarity, spiritual clarity, whatever it might be. But if you don't love the process of deciphering these messages and connecting the dots, it's not going to be a fun process. I also feel it's fundamental that we have a relationship with integrity, to really want, because what I've found is that if we don't have a commitment to wanting to know what is true for us, how can we help other people figure out what is true for them? The plants expose truth. They illuminate things that we've been lying to ourselves about, that we've been hiding from, or maybe that it wasn't time for us to know. But regardless, it's all about the illumination of truth. So to have a commitment to our own integrity feels really essential to me. And last but not least, commitment to doing our own work. None of us in the space are ever done with our own shadow exploration, with our own humanness, with our own growth and transformation. It's a big red flag for me when people have the air of, oh, I've got it all figured out. I've done 2,000 ayahuasca ceremonies. I'm good. Never true. If we're here in a body, we're still students of consciousness and we never have it all figured out. So to stay committed to our own relationship with our egos and to wanting to do our own work. I think we can only, I think it's a Carl Jung quote. He says we can only meet people to the depth of consciousness that we've met ourselves. So that has to be fundamental for our own credibility and our capacity to go really deep with the people that we work with. So that is what I wanted to share. I'm going to open it up to questions here in a second, but just to give you a little bit of information about the course that's launching on Saturday. It is the next group of the plant medicine integration training that I've been doing now for several years. It is a 6-month process where we meet every other week for a 2-hour class and every other week for a 1-hour Q&A session. And at the end of this experience, my hope is that people have enough tools, understanding of the shamanic process, that they are now empowered to begin to either more deeply help themselves integrate, or if you are called to do so, to pay it forward and help other people too. It is not just a 6-month course, it's a forever community. We have reunions every month with graduates. We also have a Discord channel where we can all stay in touch. It's like a peer-to-peer group where we can ask questions about, hey, I've got a client that's taking this medication. Is it safe with ayahuasca? All kinds of ways that we support each other. Because as I mentioned, this is a brand new modality. It's growing and changing all the time, and it really helps to have a community to support our ongoing growth and understanding. And just to emphasize that the way I teach this work is a combination of academic and scientific understanding with the shamanic lens. I share a lot of things about what it's been like to sit behind the altar with these medicines for the better part of 2 decades, which are all super helpful to helping people make sense of these experiences themselves. And I'm going to give everybody tomorrow an email with a discount code to get 25% off the course should you choose to join us. And if you have any questions, you can ask me, of course. So, all that said, your turn. Does anybody have questions about the process of integration, elements of the pillars, anything that you want to go deeper into? The floor is open. You can unmute yourself or raise your Zoom hand. Hope somebody else wants to talk. By the way, I have to apologize for dialing in from bed. I had surgery recently and I can't quite sit up yet with my stomach muscle, so I'm not usually so informal, but this is what was necessary today. All right, who wants to talk?
I'll talk. We've never met. But hello, Kat. I know about you though. Carol's my friend. She's my friend, and I'm quite anxious about doing ayahuasca, which I think is normal. And what you've just said is a lot, more than what I expected to take in. And I don't actually get the clinical side, and I don't understand IFS. I'm assuming that's an American thing. I was interested in the shamanic side as well. But do I have to understand a lot of that before I do ayahuasca? I'm in a situation where I'm getting on in years, shall we say, and I want to understand me better. I don't want to leave this life, and I like a lot of people in this world tied up with the programming of society. And I've coming to realize now since 2020 that that's not the real world. I think inside, I think I want more of the spiritual side. I want to find out who I am, what I'm here for. I want to get rid of the blockages and the resistance, which I'm doing some shadow work with somebody, not Carol. Well, I talk to Carol all the time about this, but somebody else she introduced me to. And I find when somebody says shadow work or inner child, I immediately cut off. So I'm in a situation where I do not want, sorry, I do want to do ayahuasca. I do want to do it. I just don't, I'm just beginning this journey. I don't know what the question is. I'm just explaining me. I just want to do it. I don't want to leave this life and not experience the real sort of world, which I think we've been, what's the word? They've dumbed us down, basically. It's not a true world, I don't think, that we live in. I think it's they've created this matrix for us. And I want to get through the matrix. I want to know me spiritually inside. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's me. And would you recommend? I mean, I am going to do it anyway in the next few months with a friend, without a friend. but I spoke to her today, and she'll say, Joyce, you keep sliding back. You have to keep talking to me, and I do. I talk to her all the time. And I love speaking with her because she boosts me up. I've done the mushrooms with her, and that was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And I was scared to do that as well, because you hear so much out there that it's dangerous, that it's not dangerous. It's not. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. But I don't know what I'm asking. I'm not asking. I just want to know. I can't remember everything you've said. I hope you're going to send me the recording, because I'll never remember
Yes,
all of that.
that's why we're recording it. And you don't have
Yeah.
to remember any, you don't have to know any of this to work with the plants. We
All right.
really don't. One of the cool aspects of these plants, Joyce, is they meet us where we're at. They're
Yeah.
vastly intelligent. They know how to really meet us right where we're at in our understanding of the world and ourselves. And the things that you name around your intentions, the calling that you have to sit with ayahuasca in particular, could not be more perfect. It's
Yeah.
completely aligned with what she does. Get blockages out of the way, help you
Yeah.
connect with spirit in a more like all-in experiential way, know more about who you are as a consciousness out of the
Yeah.
3D matrix. All of those things are exactly what, ayahuasca mushrooms, all of them do in their unique way. So for what it's worth, from what I am hearing, and Carol has told me a lot about you too, you are
Oh, that's
absolutely perfect for this work. And what I named around integration, whatever stands out to you of like, oh, that's the thing that feels most resonant. That's all that matters. You don't have to have memorized steps. It doesn't have to be rigid and academic. It's a very personal thing. So come as you are, but everything you shared is perfectly aligned.
oh, thank you. Can I just say something else? When I did the mushrooms, I went from the UK to a very short distance. I flew, and I was on blood thinners. I don't know if Carol told you this. I was on blood thinners. And when I did the mushrooms, I've not been on blood thinners since. I wouldn't tell anybody not to take their medication ever.
Of course, we never do that, but that's
It's
your truth and your
That's for me. That's for me. That was what happened to me. Now, I would love to go to Costa Rica and do it as well, but it's about, I don't know, 9-10 hour flight or something. Could I last that long without blood thinners? Because I'm not on blood thinners. That's really, I get scared. That's the thing that scares me about I have multiple clots. I did have multiple clots. And I actually went for a blood test about because the doctors thought I was still taking my medication, which I wasn't. I have to say I wasn't. But I did take some cayenne pepper before I went for the tests, and my blood test came back fine, no problem. cayenne pepper, for goodness sakes, you know.
Oh, it's very powerful medicine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing, Joyce. You don't have to know whether or not you could do a 9-hour flight yet. You have access to the medicine in a way that you don't have to do that.
yeah,
One thing at a time. Maybe at some point you feel like, oh, you trust your body, you want to give that a shot, use some herbal remedies to support you, but
yeah.
one thing at a time, one ceremony at a time, one experience at a time. Then we integrate that, then we know what's calling us next. No rush to kind of have the solution of when you go to Costa Rica, if you go to Costa Rica, one thing at a time.
Yeah, but I'm on a time thing with age.
I hear that. I hear
I've
that.
got to get
But
it
you've
done
got the
before.
next plan, the next step in place.
Yeah. And are you coming to the West to do it anytime?
Not currently. I don't travel
I
like
know
this.
she's asked you.
Yeah.
I know she's asked you.
I know. I would love to do that. I
I
really
know
would.
it's difficult because it's illegal in Europe. It's illegal. Well,
Yeah.
most of Europe it's illegal.
Well, most of the world, it's illegal. Yeah.
And why? Why?
Oh, that's a whole nother
Oh,
conversation.
I know
Yeah.
why. I know why. Anyway, sorry.
Well, it's
I'll
all
let
money.
somebody
Yeah.
else speak.
Yeah.
I'll let somebody else
Thank
speak.
you for
Thank you,
sharing,
Kat.
Joyce.
Lovely to meet you.
Hey, lovely to meet you too.
I'm going to find out how to switch the mute. I can't find it. There
Oh,
it's
here, I can do it for you. Got you. Okay, so
Hello, I'm Kirsty. I'm so
oh, wait.
sorry.
We have a question. How do we know if it's the right time
Ah,
to invest in the course like this? I wonder if I
hello.
have enough experience with Aya to start on this journey. I feel I just started having a relationship with Aya. Well, regarding the course, if you have even a fundamental relationship with Aya, mushrooms, whatever it might be, and a calling to understand more about the psychology of integration, as far as I'm concerned, it's the right time. You'll learn a lot more about the relationship with these beings through the course, but only you can answer if it feels like it's a time that you want to invest the money and the effort. It's about, 2 to 3 hour, every 2 week coursework investment, and including the time spent in the classes. So it is a little bit of work. So if you're super juiced up and excited and like, yeah, it's time to learn this, great. If not, I teach this once or twice a year. There will be other opportunities, but just trust your heart. Catherine, your hand is raised. You're next.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have done ayahuasca one time, and I'm not going to do it a whole lot of other times. Do I have to be big into ayahuasca to take the integration course?
No, because I happen to know you're really big into doing the master plant diets, and that counts too. Because a lot of
Okay.
what we teach in the integration is also about working with plants across the board. Ayahuasca is my main ally, so I happen to talk about her a lot, but it is not required you be an expert in ayahuasca to be passionate and helpful in the integration process. Not at all.
Okay, good. Thank you. And yes, I am big on the master plant diets. You know what though, Kat, I've only taken like one this year, kind of because of the integration issue, right? I've taken like 6 or 7 in the past, and I've gotten to kind of know these plants. In a way, I feel like I've got so much work to continue integrating with the plants I've worked with. I don't want to meet anyone else just yet. I want to go back and rework with rose and rework with lavender. So I guess I'm just telling you I haven't taken anything this year, hardly at
But
all.
that actually, to me, Catherine, makes you even more credible to help people with integration because you're taking yours really seriously. It's not about going to the next one, the next one, the next one, whether it's a diet or a ceremony, etc. It's about and some of the experiences we have are so big, it takes months, if not years, to really feel like, okay, now I'm ready to meet another plant or to have another ceremonial retreat experience. So, like, integration is not about quantity of experiences. It's about really giving the kind of honor to the experience that we had that it deserves in the aftermath. And so to me, that makes you even more credible because you're taking your time.
That's nice to hear. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
well that was my question. So yeah, anyway, thank you for yeah, talking about integration. It's wow, there's a lot to do, there's a lot to continue to work with in my life, to continue to apply the things that they told me I need to apply. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Kirsty, your turn.
Hello, everybody. Firstly, Kat, I really want to thank you for taking the time to express from the intuition and the transformation of expressing and committing and dedicating to that, it really struck a chord with me. Intuitively, I feel with the energetic system, well, I'm still a baby, but I feel that my soul's on the path with that personally as well, cleansing and helping others as best I can. And I love the lifeguard thing as well, you know, the balance of holding space for someone and not having too much transference. And again, I think that's trying to not try so hard and allow the intelligence of spirit and the plants to do their work. I've I've just got back from Peru 6 weeks ago, and I was living with Shipibo and his family, and he was a plant doctor. There was no privacy, and it's just. But I'm only 3 years on the ayahuasca path. I'm in addiction from. Sorry, I'm in recovery from addiction. I went to from like heroin addiction. I was 28 years in addiction. Went to India a few times, understood the energetic system and the nervous system, and then did yoga therapy, and we've been teaching that in rehabs and with veterans in recovery. So that want to be of service has always been my heart's desire, and I can't. And then I found I nervous system still, and I've done a few diets and master plant diets. I'm still dieting now year round now, and I hope to go back. And I was really curious about this. Whenever I've seen you on Instagram, I thought I really relate to her and what she's saying, and it feels like truth to me. And I don't know if I could commit it this time because I'm saving every penny to get back there. Um, but I feel, you know, ayahuasca isn't something I'm going to for fun, but I feel that's where my learning's going to be, and my expression and the Shipibo way. It feels like truth to me. I feel like the true masters of this system with the healing. Other traditions are great with the music, and I love that, but it feels quite young compared to the Shipibos. It's like a mother's love. So I'm gonna carry on embodying that, and but I'm really curious about this as well. It just might not be for this time, so I'm happy to. I mean, it might be, but I feel every penny's going to be for going there. But it's something I'd love to do once I've done a bit more journeying, and I'm really ready to express and hold that space. Sorry, my signal isn't great. I'm on a cheap computer. I won't pay out anything. Save for my money for diets. But when I come to want to express.
Yeah, we lost you a little bit. It got a little choppy, but I felt you, and I just want to say just what I said a little bit ago, that it's just one step at a time. If you're called to this in the future, wonderful, no rush. One of the most important things I always try to reflect to people in integration is go slow. Go slow. Urgency is a trauma response itself. And so just to trust ourselves one step at a time. So thank you for the sweet reflections. And hey, welcome to being in love with the Shipibo way of working with the medicine. I'm right there with you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Kirsty. Katie, your turn.
Hi, thanks so much. Could you give a little more insight and explain the difference between, say, the clinical versus the shamanic path?
Yeah, great
what
question.
those look like. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to start by describing what I feel is the difference between doing this work with a therapist versus doing this work with a coach that is shamanically trained. Therapy and just psychology in general tends to, and I'm going to generalize here, of course, but tends to be more about where we've come from, the events of our childhood, the experiences and traumas that we've had, the things that we've gone through as a human being, and how to unpack and work with those, and especially with this work in the context of working with the plants. Whereas if you work with somebody that's more shamanically minded or a coach, what we tend to focus more on is the future, the steps forward. Whatever is relevant in the past is great if it's involving the future sort of vision or goals that the individual has. So I advise people go the traditional clinical model if they're still working a lot with trying to make sense of childhood traumas, of trying to work through, diagnosed PTSD, that sort of thing. Whereas people who are really ready to make changes and wanting to see their lives transform with action typically do better working with a coaching model than a therapy model. And then there are people who do both, which is fantastic. The shamanic and the clinical lens are so different because this clinical lens tends to like to diagnose and to see things as illnesses. I was diagnosed bipolar, as an example. Whereas the shamanic lens looks at the things that are happening psychologically as an injury, as something that has occurred that can heal, but that is more about celebrating the lessons of that rite of passage rather than this feeling of being labeled and being diagnosed as something being wrong. So when it comes to really psychology, mental health as a whole, the shamanic lens feels as though there's no bad news. There's nothing that isn't capable of being healed. And that even something like being bipolar, my first shamanic ayahuasquero was like, oh, great, you're bipolar. You experience extremes. Good for you. You're honest about the intensity of consciousness. It's the first time anybody ever reflected that back to me in a positive way of like, wait, this is a good thing. And now I kind of see it as such. And I wish the clinical world did that, is looked at the things that make us unique based upon the lives that we've lived and see that as an opportunity for growth and learning rather than making us feel that we are broken. Now the clinical space, to be fair, is starting to evolve past this perspective. The models still exist that are anchored in this, but many of the individuals within the clinical models are starting to realize, wait, this doesn't serve us. But as a whole, those are sort of the foundational different perspectives, is the shamanic lens sees it all as an opportunity for spiritual awakening, rather than the idea that we're broken or something is wrong or something needs to be fixed.
And
That's yeah, just a tip of the iceberg, but please respond, Katie. Yeah.
and so what is the difference? What does that look like in a setting where there's an ayahuasca ceremony? I'm curious. You talk
Yeah.
about behind the altar, and what does that look like in the ceremony itself?
Well, so let's think about it just in terms of the different models of working with psychedelics as a whole. Not so much ayahuasca, because the clinical space doesn't work with ayahuasca. They are developing pharmahuasca, which is essentially a synthetic MAOI and a synthetic DMT, but there isn't quite yet a ritual for that. But we can talk about like ketamine experiences, synthetic psilocybin experiences versus shamanic experiences. So first and foremost, almost always, this clinical model is one-on-one. You go into, the doctor's office, you get the psychedelic, and it's pretty hands off because the clinical model, usually the clinician that administers the medicine, they might not even have any personal experience with it. Or if they have, they might have worked it once or twice. And it's more about physical safety. I mean, the clinical space is really good at keeping us alive and protecting our bodies. Whereas the shamanic perspective is that, first of all, it's more ritualistic and ceremony focused and usually more in community. The shamanic focus is more about healing happens as a community rather than one-on-one. And I'm not saying one is better or worse. We each are called at different times in our lives to heal in different ways. It's great that both are available. But the shamanic perspective is that we do it as a tribe, we do it as a group, and that the person facilitating is a carrier of the medicine they are administering. They probably trained for 7+ years to have a relationship with that medicine, and quite often they take the medicine themselves to hold the container for that experience. So it's just very different perspectives on safety, on the container, the set and setting. It's usually nature incorporated with the shamanic space versus a cozy doctor's office. It reflects the different mindsets of the traditions that these come from. Western world is really independent. We value isolation, figuring things out ourselves, whereas the shamanic perspectives typically value community and helping each other, being in tribal settings rather than one-on-one. I say as integration coaches, as people who help others do this, it's about finding what is true for the individual, what they need, how they define safety, what they're working with. Sometimes people are working with things that are so sensitive, they're not comfortable in a group. Well, awesome. Then maybe the clinical model is more appropriate. It's not a matter of it right and wrong. It's just very different perspectives to working with these medicines. How does
Perfect.
that?
Yeah, yeah, my experience has been more than with the Shipibo and the tribe. I didn't realize that there was a difference. So I'm grateful that I've landed where I have with a safe community. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else wanted to ask anything while we're here?
William's raising his real hand.
Oh, thank you for seeing that. I have it on speaker view. William, please.
Hi, yeah, I go by Will. But I wanted to share first of all, this presentation has been wonderful. Um, I'm I'm in my 70s now, and I've had lots of different experiences. And I know the plant medicine people uh, in Denver, and I was gonna connect with you, but then you moved to Oregon. But I'm connected with Natalie Ruiz, and she's just wonderful. And um, let's see, what else do I want to say? So I lean more into ceremonies that are indigenous. They've um, always brought me more. And I've done some individual ceremonies, but um, and even in facilitation, I've done a lot of kind of underground um, facilitating, and I find the group ceremonies to be the most powerful. And I um, and I'm just kind of I'm not sure where my place is now, and so I'm kind of looking for it. I in Colorado, they've come out with the Natural Medicine Health Act that has all these criteria and um, hoops that you're going to have to jump through to get any kind of licensing and stuff like that. So I'm not really interested in any of that at this point. Not to mention the exorbitant cost of it. And so sometimes so where do I go next? Where do I guess that's my question. And
Where is your heart, Will? Is it in the facilitation of ceremony work with the plants themselves in the underground? I mean, the easy answer, because
it might be, it
okay,
might be.
yep, because the underground is still alive and well. It just has to be more underground. We just have to be more and more careful because there is an upper ground, regulation and all of the things that you mentioned. But and there's also, the thing that I do is ceremony work in the places where it's legal, where it's welcome, working in Peru and Costa Rica,
Yeah.
where it isn't so underground, because the US is kind of dicey right now. I got arrested in Denver. They threatened me with 40 years in prison. I'm done with
I
Colorado.
got it. Yeah, I understand.
Even with the Natural Medicine Act, they're putting people in jail that aren't following all of their hoops, right? So, but it's just a matter of where your heart is, and because we can make anything work or make sense mentally, right? But this work is all about heart work, and wherever your heart is, I have found the partnership with the plants themselves, Aya being my number one, there is absolutely nothing that plant can't help me co-create. Every time I brought her this vision of, okay, now I want to work in Costa Rica and I want to have the right team, and here's my vision for the retreat, and boom, like she helps me
Yeah.
co-create it. Because anything is possible, and they really need us to be carriers and to do this work with integrity. So it's a matter of really doing that, like, where does your heart lie? You don't want to jump through the hoops of the regulatory system. I don't blame you. You don't have to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And anytime you want to reach out and pick my brain, like, please, like, I love to help people find their calling on this path, because there's been so many people that did this from me. And I'm so grateful to have this be the walk that I get to do every day. So anytime I can pay it forward, I'm happy to do so. Thank you
Thank
to
you.
all of you for just showing up with your hearts, and the thoughtful questions and listening and all of the things. It is an honor to be on this path with all of you. Uh, the If you want to join me in this next course, here, let me put the URL in chat for the course itself, and then your code is webinar, and that actually gets 25% off, which is a $725 discount. So it would be an honor to see you in the course or anything in the future. And just wishing you all really fulfilling paths and connections with the plant beings. Oh, thank you for speedy recovery wishes. I'm working on it. See you all again sometime soon, I hope. Be well out there. Much love.